Bon après-midi. Bienvenue à la première des 4 conférences sur l'innovation sociale au Collège Becker. Les cours seront donnés par le Dr David Jordan. Le thème de la conférence d'aujourd'hui est « Changer le monde par l'entrepreneuriat et l'entreprise sociale ». I chose to open today's introduction in French as a token of solidarity and support for a great nation in distress. Tomorrow, the college community will come together for a ceremony at noon at the Peace Pulse on the Worcester and Leicester campuses to show its support and solidarity for the people of France. We'll hear more about tomorrow's event after today's lecture. And welcome to Becker's first of 4 lectures on social innovation. These lectures are part of the college's preparations and celebrations around our Yunus Social Business Center. These celebrations, of course, will culminate with Dr. Mohamed Yunus's visit in early April 2016. My name is Leo Irakliotis. I'm the college's provost, and I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker today. The lecture series on social innovation will be presented by Dr. David Jordan. The topic for today's lecture is Changing the World through Social Entrepreneurship and Social Business. Dr. David Jordan is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Seven Hills Foundation. During its 60 years, the foundation has cared for people who have the ability to thrive when given the support, respect, and dignity that all human beings deserve. The foundation utilizes models of medication-assisted therapies and positive behavioral supports to help children and adults who need medically intensive interventions supported with clinical expertise and compassion in the least restrictive environments. David has led the foundation and its operating affiliates since 1995. As president, he is responsible for the overall clinical and business operations of Seven Hill Foundations and affiliates, which currently include over 260 locations, 3,700 professional and support staff, and an annual operating budget of just over $200 million. A trustee of Becker College, David earned his doctorate in health administration from the Medical University of South Carolina, a Master of Arts in Special Education from Salve Regina University, a Master of Public Administration from Clark University, and his Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the University of Rhode Island. With over 35 years of experience in rehabilitation, education, and healthcare management, Dr. Jordan has a profound understanding of social businesses and how enterprises can combine social utility and financial sustainability. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David Jordan.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. I am excited, I'm enthused, I'm happy to be here with you today, and I'm going to try to spend as much time as I can giving you as much information. There are two ways you can go about these things. We can take a bit of time and talk about not a whole lot, but make it pleasant. Or we can try to share and dive deeply as fast as we can with as much information as possible. And I've chosen the latter today. Why? Because I may never get to meet you again. And the topic that I want to talk about, and the topics, in my opinion, are so relevant to young people today. You are going to carry the future. My generation, the baby boom generation, blew it. We were worrying about things like McMansions and Lexuses and nice fancy things. And what we're leaving you is an environment that's degraded, social issues around the world, social issues here in the United States, a number of issues that you and your children, particularly to our students, are going to inherit. Do I think we can address them? Yes, I do. I do. I believe that with all my heart for one reason. Every semester I teach at least 2 courses at Clark University, and every semester I come away feeling more optimistic than ever. The future is in the hands of our youth, and it's up to you to make a change. You have to be the change. And so these are some of the things that I want to emphasize to you today. And I'm happy at any time, if any student here particularly, or faculty, would like to follow up and chat further about anything that I'm about to share, I'm delighted to, I'm happy to. What was not overly mentioned or mentioned in the introduction is that perhaps the most important thing that I do beyond my work in healthcare at Seven Hills is my teaching. At this stage in my career, there is nothing more important that I can do. Seven Hills is a wonderful organization. I'm blessed to have great staff. I support thousands of individuals in need, but it's my few students every semester that I take the great pride and great concern with, because they're going to be the next leadership. Not only do I teach at Clark, but I was also blessed this past year to be named the first professor of practice here at Becker College. Professor of Practice in Social Innovation, which emphasizes Becker's interest and focus on really getting serious about changing the world. You know, we can have slogans all we want, be the change, change the world, whatever. Of all the colleges and universities I associate with, and there are a number of them, there's only one college in the United States that I feel honestly believes that and is doing something about it. And that's Becker College. Through your commitment of global citizenship, your commitment to take people around the world and expose them, to determine and focus in on the individual needs of every student. I can think of no other university or college that has such a determined effort around this focus. So, with that, I want to throw out lots of information to you, and let's see where it takes us. And then at the end, I'm going to extend to you a challenge for us all going forward. So I was asked to talk about this notion of changing the world, but let's ask ourselves the question, why do we need to change the world? What are the issues in the world we want to change? So let's start there, because there are boatloads of things. For context, I want to throw out and suggest to you the Millennium Development Goals, which are written by the United Nations in 2000 that run through 2015 this year. In September of this year, we adopted, the United Nations, the world adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. But I want to talk first about the Millennium Development Goals. The challenge that I'm going to offer you all, and I'm going to offer the board here at Becker, and I'm going to offer the leadership at Becker. There is not one university or college in the United States where every graduating senior has a broad working knowledge of what the Millennium Development Goals or the SDGs are about. What is the context of the world in which you function? My hope, my desire, my dream is that at one day, maybe beginning this year or next, every graduating student here at Becker College will at least know that there are the MDGs, and more importantly, there are SDGs. If you do that, you will be the first university or college in the United States of America where every graduating student can at least say, I know what some of the social issues are in this world, and I can do something about them. So that's going to be my challenge to the university's administration and board of trustees, and I hope that I can work closely with the faculty, the folks that guide our education and learning here. I want to talk a little bit about the case for social entrepreneurship and what this thing called social business is, and then I want to end by giving you some of my own perspectives on social entrepreneurship and social business and what I do in the realm of social entrepreneurship. So some of the issues that we face obviously are here. Poverty run amok. Lack of education for girls around the world. Healthcare is not evenly distributed. Population growth. In the year 1800, we had 1 billion people. The year 1900, we had 2.1 billion people. In the year 2012, we had 7 billion people. Today, we have 7.3 billion people. Anyone a biology major here? You know what the term carrying capacity means? Yes, you do. Carrying capacity means that you put a bunch of rabbits on an island. That island can only accommodate so many rabbits, and then they begin to die off. The earth that we share is an island. Many scientists are suggesting that the Earth's carrying capacity is somewhere around 11 billion people. Do you know when we're going to hit 11 billion people? In your lifetime. Not mine, in your lifetime. And certainly your children are going to have to deal with that. How are we going to accommodate clean water, sanitation, education, healthcare, food security, and a variety of other issues if we don't begin today trying to accommodate those very, very pressing needs that I guarantee you will not escape from? Cognitive dissonance. Any psychology majors in the room? When issues become too difficult for us to wrap our head around, we pretend they don't exist. It's called cognitive dissonance. We cannot avoid these issues that we're going to talk about. But we can begin to do something about them. And we can begin today. We must begin. So let me give you some background facts and some of the issues that I want to chat about. Infectious disease. 3.2 million people are at risk of malaria today. In 2015, almost 500 million people were affected by malaria, and over 1 million people died. Malaria. Simple pill, easily accessible in this country, in any Western country. They cost a few pennies per pill. 1 million people around the world died this past year as a result of malaria. In Africa, children under 5 are 75% of those who will succumb due to malaria. Tuberculosis is another very pressing need. How about our environment? Some topic that I want to talk about in the second lecture series in the next several months. It's perhaps one of your greatest challenges, dealing with our environment. Deforestation causes extinction of approximately 100 species of flora and fauna a day. Tonight when you go to bed, 100 species will be gone per day. CO2 continues. I remember 5 or 10 years ago, scientists saying that if we ever reached 350 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, we're in real trouble. Do you know what we are as of this morning? 398.5 parts per million in the atmosphere. And that's rising for a lot of reasons. Global population being one. Industrialization being another. I don't know how we're going to turn the clock back on that, but that's a future that we have looking square at us in the face. We've blown by 350. We're heading to 400 and beyond. Sanitation and water. 800 to 1 billion people on the planet lack access to clean drinking water. Anyone have clean drinking water today? Do you know how precious a commodity this is? I work in places like Sierra Leone and Liberia, in the bush, and I have people drinking sewer water, because that's it. That's what we got. And so we have to begin thinking about wells and making more available clean water to people. We've made good progress, not enough. How about sanitation? Over 2 billion people on the planet out of 7 billion don't have a toilet or have access to sanitation. That's going to grow as our cities become enormous, 20, 30 million in size over the next 20 to 30 years. Access to safe water, according to Kofi Annan and the United Nations, is a basic human right that nearly 1 billion people on this planet don't have access to. Malnutrition and hunger. Globally, about 160 million children under 5 were estimated to be stunted, meaning their growth is stunted forever because of malnutrition or lack of nutrients in their food. United Nations estimates 800 million of the 7.3 billion people we have today on the planet, or 1 in 9, suffer from chronic undernourishment. 45% of children in Southeast Asia are undernourished and underweight. Malnutrition is still devastating the poorest of the poor. Not in the developed countries. I'm not malnourished. I don't see anyone in this room that's malnourished. We live in a beautiful little fishbowl. But there are hundreds of thousands and millions of children and adults in the developing world, the 4 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid, who do not have access and food security. About reproductive and child health. Maternal mortality rate in developing countries in 2015 is about 239 deaths per 100,000 live births. In the US, it's about 12. In Sweden, it's about 3. We're going to find this repeated constantly. If you happen to be poor, and if you happen to come from areas of the world that are under-resourced, you are at a distinct disadvantage. We at Becker are significantly advantaged. So the question is, what do we do? How do we uplift and dignify people who are poor? Childbirth is one of the leading causes of death in women in the developing world. 99% of all maternal deaths occur in developing countries, and every day approximately 850 women die. I have a clinic in Sierra Leone, built in the bush, and women come to us every day. Some of them don't make it because they have to walk for 20 miles, and they die. This is not fiction. This is my reality, and the reality of people that I am privileged to work with. By the end of 2015, over 300,000 women will die unnecessarily during childbirth. So those are some background facts on some of the things that we and you have to deal with. Whoop. So let me talk briefly now about the big context. So how do we wrap our head around all the various social issues that we could possibly think of? Well, the United Nations did us a favor. Back in 2000, they said, okay, there's so many issues. What we want to do is be able to prioritize. And we're going to prioritize 8 significant issues that are affecting people principally in the developing world. Africa, South Asia, certain parts of South America, certain parts of the Caribbean. Not necessarily in Europe, certainly not necessarily in North America, but in the developing world. Overcoming poverty, as Nelson Mandela has told us, is not a task of charity. It's an act of justice. Muhammad Yunus will tell us that poverty is a man-made construct and should be aggressively eliminated. His ambition is to eliminate poverty. Why not? Or should we say, how about if we eliminate 50% of poverty? And the other 50%, well, we're always going to have the poor. The ambition is to set the bar high and to allow you to figure out ways that we can eliminate poverty. It's a man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. Sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. And I believe in the bottom of my heart, and I say this with all earnestness and absolute utter belief, you are that generation. The students attending Becker and Clark and WPI and Holy Cross and Harvard and Stanford and every college in the United States and in Europe that is privileged, you are the generation. There is nobody else. There is nobody else. You are it. And I know you don't like to hear that. But there is no time and there is no other resource. Your generation will be the generation that people will look back 200 years from today and say they were able to turn the tide on environmental degradation, on this grossness of poverty, on the streamlining of how do we deal with a population of 11 billion people, how do we deal with cities. You're it. We've got to figure this out together. So we created back in 2000 8 Millennium Development Goals. The United Nations did, and the first was to eradicate extreme poverty. The second was to achieve universal primary education. Why? Because children, particularly girls, are not afforded education in many parts of this world. Anyone ever hear of the young woman named Malala? Great, thank you. She co-won the Nobel Peace Prize for her stand against the Taliban when they shot her in the head because she wanted an education in Pakistan. And she stood up And she survived, and she fights today to make education for young girls a right and not a privilege. The third was to promote gender equality and empower women. There's a great Chinese proverb that says, women make up half the sky. Women make up half the sky. You know, as a man, I want as much help as I can possibly get. And for men to not allow women to take their rightful place in all aspects of society, to earn comparable wages, to have same status, to be able to control their bodies, to stand as a dignified and valued human being is just stupid on our part. We need to value and promote gender equality. Fourth is to reduce child mortality. We are losing too many children under the age of 5 to simple things like measles and bad water. Improve maternal health. There are different areas of the developing world with higher maternal mortality rates. In Sierra Leone, for one, 5 years ago, the maternal mortality rate outside of the city of Bo, Sierra Leone, was 1 in 8. 1 in 8 women died in Bo, Sierra Leone, 5 years ago, giving birth. An outrageously high amount of death, unnecessary death, because there's no primary health care. Combat HIV/AIDS and other diseases, ensure environmental stability, and develop a global partnership for economic development. Number 8 was Bono. You know, Bono from YouTube. He would argue constantly that what we need to do, and he's right, is to create economic development. Charity is not sustainable. Let me repeat that. Charity is not sustainable. Martin Luther King told us that in his Vietnam War speech, Ebenezer Baptist Church. Compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It begins by removing the artifice which creates the beggar in the first place. And what he was saying is, give people jobs, economic privilege and rights, education, whatever the society affords everyone else. That's where compassion begins. Don't fling a coin, welfare. But yet we continue to do the same thing in the developing world. $1 trillion has gone into Africa over the past 30 years in aid, and not a whole lot of progress to show for it, because we are not engaging Africans in their countries, not all countries, most countries in Africa, in economic partnerships. What we're doing is flinging a coin. Why? Because we want their bauxite, we want their oil, and we want a lot of other resources. I see this firsthand in Sierra Leone. When I last visited there, I was taken to a soccer stadium that the Chinese are building. A soccer stadium in a country that has fewer than 300 doctors. Beautiful soccer stadium, Olympic-sized soccer stadium. No one will be able to play in it. No one has adequate sneakers. But they have a soccer stadium, and the quid pro quo is you give me the bauxite up in McKinney, the northern part of Sierra Leone, and we'll build you a soccer stadium and a road. And that's the trade-off. That's what we have done in the West to the poorest of the poor, and that has to stop. So in the United Nations, again, in 2000, created these 8 Millennium Development Goals so that we could get our head around what were the most important. And that ran until this year. They end in December 31st. We've spent the last year in the United Nations now trying to figure out what do we do for the next 15 years? What happens from 2015 to 2030? What is the sweet spot of your generation going to worry about? And so what we've now created, what the world has created through input of millions of people, is something called the Sustainable Development Goals. And what they've done is they've created 17 of these. Let me share a little bit of additional information. Although we've made good progress with the MDGs, because we have some form of unifying agenda, we've come together finally. We need more. We need a lot more. We need to do much more. So again, let me talk to you briefly about some of the highlights of the MDGs. So what did we accomplish? Well, We have the number of people now living in extreme poverty. Made great progress. It's declined by more than half, falling from 1.9 billion people to about 1 billion people this year. So we have about 1 billion people living at about $1.25 US per day. Try to live on $1.25 US per day. Not very easy. The number of people in the working middle class earning actually more than $4 a day has increased substantially. It's tripled. The proportion of undernourished people in developing regions dropped by almost half since 1990, when we began thinking about how do we coordinate our MDGs. The number of out-of-school children, particularly girls who were never allowed an education, has dramatically been reduced. Why? Because we focused on it. Why? Because lots of women all around the world finally stood up and said, stop. These girls need an education. And I don't care what country you're in or what customs you have. You owe it to your children to allow them to be educated. And it worked. Women standing up for girls finally worked. Much more to do. Gender parity in primary schools has been achieved in the majority of countries, not all, but the majority. Over 62 million people, malaria deaths have been averted, although still many die. Between 2000 and 2013, TB diagnosis and treatment intervention saved an estimated 37 million lives, just TB. Worldwide, 2.1 billion people have gained access to improved sanitation. We still have 2 billion that don't. 147 countries have met their MDG drinking water target. We still have about 1 billion people that don't have clean water. And official development assistance from developing countries increased 66% between 2000 and 2014. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not because we're nice. I'm going to suggest to you it's because it's in our enlightened self-interest. Developed countries have fewer children. Just statement of fact. Lots of papers written on this. If you have a developed, strong economy, you naturally have fewer children. The United States went through the same process. In the 1800s, we have lots of kids, eight or 9 kids per family. We became an industrial nation, suddenly our population dropped. It is in our enlightened self-interest if we want to begin leveling off this tremendous growth in population. If we allow the rich to become richer and the poor to become poorer, and the economists in the room, it's called the Gini coefficient, named after an Italian economist, Gini, who determined that there is actually a quantitative measure that he could calculate. In fact, Worcester has a Gini coefficient. Massachusetts has a Gini coefficient. The United States has a Gini coefficient. And he proved that the larger that Gini coefficient, the greater their likelihood for social unrest and anarchy and civil conflict. All we have to do is just keep pushing out the wealthy beyond the means of the poor, and guess what's going to happen? We're going to have conflict. What do you see occurring in the Middle East right now? An economic disparity that is so out of control, we have people, millions of people migrating out of countries in the Middle East. So enrollment in primary education in developing regions has worked. We've done a good job. Primary education, we've achieved. We've done a great job. Universal primary education, yes. The issue of reducing child mortality, we've made good progress. Still more to do. Promoting gender equality and empowering women. Many more girls are now enrolled in school compared to 15 years ago. Lots of progress, more to do. MDG 4, again, 17,000 fewer children due to child mortality deaths, under 5. Much more work to do in the area of child mortality. And that can be looked at in terms of basic public health, water, sanitation, basic health care, basic immunizations. And you can reduce child mortality substantially. How about MDG 5? The issue of maternal mortality we talked about fell 45% since 1990. We've made very good progress, but only one woman in every number of them receive any form of basic care, prenatal health care. Tremendously needed. 5, improved maternal health. Again, made progress, much more to do. Number 6, the notion of combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. Again, made very good progress, still a long way to go, particularly in areas of tuberculosis and other problems that we face, HIV, AIDS, etc. MDG number 7, 2.6 billion people have gained access to improved drinking water. About 1 billion are left. Need to work on that. This is another one that concerns me, the environment. 13 million hectares of forest continue to be deforested and destroyed every year. Why? Because people need food. We have a growing population. They need to be fed. What is the answer? Cut down a lot of trees. What does that cause? More CO2, which has a negative circular effect. All of these things, ladies and gentlemen, are inextricably connected. 2014, more money was increased for MDG 8, which is economic development. We need to invest economically in the developing world. If we don't, we do it at our peril. If we want to hoard what we have here, we do so at our peril. And I would also suggest to you that the lifestyle that we enjoy today, I hope we can maintain. Anyone want to guess how much oil reserve is in the ground? How many years we have left? 30. There's 30 years left of oil. Someone, some social entrepreneur, some social business, some corporate magnate better figure out a replacement for fossil fuel. We have 30 years left. How old are some of our students? 20? Well, there you go. We have got to figure this issue out. So, despite much success, much yet needs to be done. With all of that said, we're now at a point in 2015 where we've taken stock. Lots of good progress, lots yet to do. Women are still not fully educated. Girls need a better education. Healthcare needs to be promoted. The environment is a train wreck right now, which will be the topic of a discussion that I'd like to have at our next meeting. It is so dire that there are some scientists are suggesting we've already reached the tipping point. It may be too late. I don't believe so. I think we can reverse. But I worry about the conflation of CO2s that we currently have in the atmosphere, our growing population in the world, and the fact that we have Russia, China and India coming online who are becoming more industrialized. And all one has to do is pick up a magazine to find out what's going on environmentally in China. Very difficult circumstances. And China, and soon to be India, which will surpass China in real population over the next 10 to 15 years, India will be the largest country. They're all going to require fossil fuel. They all want access to clean water. They all want everything that you and I have. And there's only so much to go around. So we're either going to have to figure out new and better ways of sharing our common wealth, or we're going to have to change the lifestyle that we've so enjoyed. The algorithm is pretty clear. The next 30 years is going to be critically important. So now that we're through 2015, we face the next 15 years, Sustainable Development Goals, and I want to run through very quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I put a lot of information on here because I want to leave this PowerPoint with Dr. Pilata-Fontaine, and if any faculty want to use any bits of it, parts of it, all of it, if students want to access it. My interest is just sharing information so that you are better informed about some of the issues that you're going to have to deal with. Whether or not you're a nursing student or a business major or a healthcare major or a computer app, mass digi major, we all have skills that need to be brought to this table. Not one of us does not have a skill that we need to bring to the table. And I'm going to talk about that just a moment when we talk about social entrepreneurship and social business. And then I'll open it up for some questions. So what are we going to look at over the next 15 years? What are the next 15-year big issues that the world has to accommodate, called the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, I've broken them out into major categories, and the major categories are pretty clear. One is dignity and poverty and to fight inequalities. Poverty is the big issue. We need to fight poverty. So the SDGs are 1, 3, and 5 relate to that. I'll go over those in a minute. People, ensure healthy lives, knowledge, and the inclusion of women and children. Women and children have been left out. We need to bring them back in and give them a much stronger role in finding solutions to our global concerns. The planet, perhaps the biggest concern your generation is going to deal with. Perhaps. Last week I was out in California doing some work with an energy company, Marin County, clean energy. And all they're talking about in California is about energy. How are they going to access enough electricity, enough broad energy to accommodate its growing population in a way that's sustainable, that isn't dependent upon coal or fossil fuel? They are just overwhelmed with this issue, while at the same time they're facing the worst water crisis they've faced in 100 years. They don't have any water. And you don't feel that effect until you're in a community that doesn't have water. Partnership. How do we work with developing countries to uplift them so that they can become part of our global economy? That is the wisest thing that we could do, is to partner and uplift, to reduce the Gini coefficient. Yes, there are always going to be wealthy people, and quite frankly, I'm a fan of capitalism within parameters. Within parameters. But we need to partner with poor countries and poor people. We need to give them jobs. Muhammad Yunus created something in 1976 called microcredit. Revolutionized the world, particularly for women. One of my organizations is a microfund. We provide microfunds to farmers and people around the world. And I see it every day, the change in people with a $50 microloan or a $20 microloan. Anyone ever hear of kiva.org? Yeah? Please share that information. Please, students, do not buy your dad a tie he will never wear this Christmas. Please don't do that. Faculty, share with your students the wisdom of giving in a selfless way a loan, not a gift, a loan. Go to kiva.org, kiva.org. Begun 7 years ago by 2 people your age out of Berkeley, California, who figured out they knew a lot about technology, just as Tim Lowe and all the folks here at Mass Digi know a lot about technology. Figure out how do we use technology to change the world. Kiva did it. 2 young people figured it out. Go to Kiva, give your dad a gift card out of Kiva and sit down with him and look at all the people around the world that you can make a loan to. And the last one is prosperity. How do we grow our economy? So the first is this notion of no poverty. These slides, by the way, were taken last week in Berlin at the Yunus Social Business Conference that Dr. Johnson and I and others here at the college attended. The first of the new SDGs is to end poverty. Muhammad Yunus has this bold, audacious goal. Poverty is man-made. Let's figure out a way to get rid of it. Anything short of that is just not good enough. So let's figure out how to end poverty. That's goal number 1. The second one is to eliminate hunger. Too many people today, as we've talked about, are malnourished or undernourished. I see it in my work. We don't think that that exists anymore. Trust me, it does. I see bloated stomachs in Liberia, in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, in Kenya. I work in an area in Kenya called Kibera. Anyone ever heard of Kibera? Kibera is the largest slum in East Africa. Think about this. 1 million people, 1 million people live in 1 square mile. You can't imagine the compression of human bodies. And the children there have bloated stomachs. Why? Because there's not enough to eat. And there's nowhere else to go. 1 million people in 1 square mile. We need to eliminate hunger. You need to eliminate hunger in the world. And there are many ways that I'm not going to discuss today that you can read about how we can do that. The proportion of undernourished people in the world in 1990 was almost 25% of the world was malnourished. In 2013, it was 14%. We've made good progress. 14% of 7.3 billion people is still a lot of people that are hungry. We need to do something about that. Goal number 3 is provide good health and well-being, provide health care for people around the world. I am constantly astounded that the wealthiest country in the world, the United States of America, is still arguing basic health care for the poor in this country. Over 50 bills in Congress have been submitted to try to reduce or eliminate or thwart the advancement of the Affordable Health Care Act. If you have health care, if you're a congressman or a senator, no big deal. I got health care. If I work, no problem. For a company that affords me health care, I have health care. What about the 40 million people who are underinsured or not insured at all? This is what President Obama was trying to get at. And we as the United States share in that burden. And so yes, we pay a little bit more, and companies pay a little bit more to accommodate the needs of health care. Take that and exponentially blow it up to the world, where there, in many parts of the globe, there is no health care. None. Zero. If you're sick, you're sick. If you die, you die. Quality education, again, particularly for girls in the world. We have made good progress through the MDGs. The SDGs is pushing this even further. We need to work on this to provide education for children. 1990, the percentage of enrollment in primary education was 88%. 2012, it was 90%. We've made progress. 2% of the world's children are now in an educational environment. Pretty simple, basic. In Sierra Leone, we have 2 schools. Primary education for about 600 children. You know what they ask me for when I go to Sierra Leone or Liberia or even Kenya? They don't ask me for money. Little kids don't ask me for money. You know what they ask me for? On the streets when I walk? I want to take a guess? Pencils. Why? Because for them, education is everything. 10 generations before them never knew how to write, read, or add anything. And for a child in a developing country to be able to spell their name on a piece of paper or to be able to do sums is just beyond belief. Anyone here a first-generation college student? I am. My parents and grandparents came from Portugal. My grandparents never spoke English. My parents' first language was Portuguese. I was the first person in my entire family to ever go to graduate from high school and then go to college. I know what the privilege is to have an education. It's amazing for a kid in Sierra Leone or Guatemala or Haiti, where I work, to be able to do basic things that we just take for granted. And pencils, pencils are gold. Collect pencils. Dr. Pilato Fontaine and I are taking 8 or 10 students from Becker to a partner that I have in Loma Linda, Guatemala. We need pencils for those kids. Pencils. Not money, we need pencils. SDG 5, gender equality. Let's uplift women. Let's make sure that they are, in fact, half the sky, as the Chinese proverb goes. Provide them equal privilege and equal rights. Gender parity index for gross enrollment ratios in 1990 was 0.69, 2012 was 0.99. We actually surpassed our MDG goal, made good progress, more needs to be done. 6, clean water and sanitation. We've talked about this a number of times. 1 billion people on the planet don't have clean water. 2 billion people on the planet defecate in the bush or in lakes or streams. Now that's great if you have a stream. The problem is villages tend to migrate and populate by streams. So if you can imagine this, you are the first village upstream. Okay? And outside of your hut, upstream is where you wash your clothes, drink your water. Middle stream is where you clean things. Downstream from your village, 50 yards, is where you defecate. That's your toilet. Village 1 is great. Can you imagine being village 25? And what you are drinking? And then we wonder why the mortality rate for children under 5 is so high in the developing world. Because there is no clean drinking water. I would love any student or faculty at Becker to join with us and go to places like Sierra Leone. I'll be in Sierra Leone and Ghana in January. And be able to see how wells are hand dug. There's no drilling equipment, it's all hand dug. And what people do the first time they pump. I still today cry every time I think about it. Looking up when we built a well in Bandoa. The well had never been used because we were dedicating it that day. 800 villages came to dedicate a well. And as we were talking, the village leaders were talking, I remember sitting there looking up, and 3 little girls had walked over to this well pump. True story. And unbeknownst to anyone else, because I was facing them, they started pumping the handle. And all of a sudden, water comes out. And the girls jumped up and started screaming. It's the first time they've ever tasted clean water. And that's what 1 billion people on the planet don't have. And you and I need to make it happen somehow. Affordable and clean energy. We need to make available new ways of producing energy that is affordable, sustainable, and clean. Decent work and economic growth for all people. In Haiti, Haiti is probably the country I go to that is the biggest train wreck. It's not only poor, it's dangerous, and it's angry. Why? Because there is no economic development, there is no or little decent work. On the same island of Hispaniola that Haiti and the Dominican Republic share, if you fly over, the Dominican Republic is all green, beautiful, resorts, zip lines, we can go and have a ball. The same island, you fly over Haiti, it's brown. All the trees are cut because people use it for firewood. There's no economic development, and young adults, young men in particular, are mad. The Gini coefficient strikes again. And I get off a plane, a white American, perceived to have plenty of money, and you don't think I'm not particularly liked? I'm resented. Who are these people think they are? Coming down here to solve my problems in Haiti. Just give me a goddamn job. That'll solve my problems. Don't fling coins at me. Give me decent work and I'll do it. But without jobs, I've nothing. And Haiti has nothing. 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. That's where you all come in. Innovation. We've got to figure out new and better ways of bringing technologies to the developing country. There are no landlines, telephone. Anyone have a landline at your home? Your parents, perhaps? A telephone with a wire connected to it? Yeah. They don't even conceptualize that in many parts of the world because they completely flipped and jumped over that technology. It's absolutely cell phones. We need to provide more technology to the developing world so that they can jump hopscotch much of what we had to go through so that they can be quickly uplifted. Reduce inequalities, particularly with women, particularly in women in jobs, in payment, in work. We need to create sustainable cities and communities. As I said earlier, we're going to see a proliferation of cities around the world that you cannot even possibly imagine today in 2015. Cities of 30 million, 40 million people and more. You see, for the first time in history, last year, we have more people living in urban settings than in rural settings. The world is flipping to an urban environment, and we've got to figure out how we're going to accommodate policing, good politics, water, sanitation. Mexico City, anyone been to Mexico City? Spends nearly half of its time pumping in water because they continue to run out of it. Mexico City doesn't have enough water for its population. And that's at 20 million, 25 million. Wait until it hits 40. What are we going to do then? We need people like you. We need scientists that are young. We need people to figure out, agronomists to figure out how do we capture rainwater? How do we capture water from the hills and sustain it through forests so it can be pumped into these huge urban settings? Responsible consumption and production of property, of goods, materials. Businesses. Many of you are going to run businesses or going to work for businesses, or perhaps your family's own businesses. We have got to figure out how to be more sustainable in the world. And how do we run these businesses in a way that we can continue on for the next generation. Climate action, as I said earlier, perhaps one of the biggest issues you're going to be concerned about or have to deal with. This is a topic unto itself, unlike any other. Emissions of CO2 in the atmosphere in 1990 was 21. Today, it's over 31. And I guarantee you that's going to increase as a result of greater population and greater industrialization, particularly in India and China. What are you going to do? How are we going to figure this out? How are we going to create products and services, scrubbers, do whatever we have to, while we're at the same time cutting down forests, which are CO2 sinks? All the directions are going in the wrong way. And we've got to figure this one out. We need social entrepreneurs and social business people to figure this one out for us. Life below the water. Do you know that 90% of large fish are gone? Done? Deal? You ever see that show on TV, Wicked Tuna or something? One tuna fish is like $12,000. Why? Because there aren't very many tuna fish left in the world anymore. And once they're gone, ladies and gentlemen, they're gone. Life on the land. Again, we're losing 100 flora and fauna a day. 100 species extinct forever. We've got to figure out better ways to address that. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. What's going on now in the Middle East is a good example. We have so much turmoil going on with civil conflict, migrating people, what to do with migrating people, how do we support them, what do we do here in Worcester to support immigrants, how do we accommodate new Americans, how does Europe accommodate them, particularly after the advent of what happened in Paris the other day. We're going to have, you're inheriting a world of shifting migrant populations, of mass scales, looking for one thing, a better life. A life that they can give to their children. Roof over their head, an education, some food, a reasonable amount of dignity. And when you don't have that, people move. So let's be prepared for a shifting world. And finally, partnerships. And it's all about partnerships. It's all about trying to figure out how do we link the business community in the world, the government sector of the world, and ultimately the most powerful sector of the three. The most powerful by far the emerging power, you, the citizen sector. That was not true until the mid-1990s. Why the mid-1990s? The internet. We suddenly were able to talk to each other around the world instantaneously. Before that, we couldn't. And so government had power, business had power. Citizen sector, pretty much we reacted. Today, that's all changed. Arab Spring, great example. Governments topple when enough citizens get together and create social change. Do you think Mr. Starbucks woke up one day and said, you know what, I think we ought to pay farmers in Guatemala a little bit more money for coffee because I feel real good about that? Nope. A bunch of citizens, young people, young hippies out in the Northwest said, it's not fair. I'm not going to buy your coffee until you pay people a fair wage. And that's where the whole concept of fair trade came. Not because of industry or government. It came as a result of you, young people, college students, who said, enough, I'm done. You're going to have to do something about this. So now you have a working knowledge, that's the sustainable donut. You have a working knowledge of two important, critically important things that, again, I'm going to repeat, that I hope all college students at Becker, by the time they graduate, at least can say to anyone, I know there were MDGs, and I know there are SDGs. And these are the most critical social issues that we need to work on in terms of humanity. If every graduating student at Becker College can say that, you will be the first college or university in the country to have every graduating senior say, I know about that. I may not know the details, I may not be able to recite all the facts and figures, but I know that our world is in trouble, and I know that there's something called the SDGs. And I know that I can do something about that if I want. Be that generation. You want to change the world? At least be aware of these things, and tell your children, and tell your friends, and tell your parents. And if you can do that, Becker will be not only the first college in the United States to be an officially sanctioned UNIS Center for Social Business, but you'll be the first college university that I know of anywhere that can say, every senior that walks by that stage can say, yep, I know about them. So I call upon all faculty, the nursing department, biology department, the business department, the mass digi department, all your departments, somehow, possibly, 1 hour lecture. Use some of this, take it. Use whatever you want. Just share with your students that there are such things, that the context of the world that they live in is much larger than the textbook that they're reading for this test. The textbook that they're reading for the test is important, but it pales by comparison to the context of the world we're about to inherit. So understand that there are MDGs, that there are SDGs, and that there are issues that we can deal with. Just a few more minutes. So where does social entrepreneurship and social business fit into this whole realm of things? Well, we'd have to go back and define what entrepreneurship is. You know, if someone says to me, well, I run a donut factory, so I'm an entrepreneur, wrong. An entrepreneur is different from a business person. An entrepreneur is an artist. An entrepreneur does something innovative, does something creatively different, creatively disruptive. That's an entrepreneur, a business entrepreneur. Bill Gates of the world, Steve Jobs of the world, Malcolm Forbes of the world, they've done something different and new. They become business entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is a creative process that pursues an opportunity to produce something new. Replicating something that already exists is not entrepreneurship. It might be a good business, but it's not entrepreneurship. Began by Jean-Baptiste Say back in the 17th century when he called entrepreneurs, he coined the term venturesome individuals. They did weird things. They just did stuff differently. Definition has expanded over the years from seizing opportunity to creating new and dynamic opportunities. Innovation is the big word. Peter Drucker, famed economist, not every small business is entrepreneurial or represents entrepreneurship. Innovation, seizing opportunities, change are what define entrepreneurs. And so that's sort of the vector for an entrepreneur. You want to be an entrepreneur? The three vectors, what do they really do? They innovate, they creatively disrupt, they mess things up, they do things different. They take something that exists and tweak it. That's an entrepreneur. And why do they do that? In my opinion, because that's their artistic muse. There are artists, there are actors, there are songwriters, there are singers, there are people that live by the nature of their artistic bent. They have to do it. They have no recourse. It's part of their DNA to create. Architects create beautiful buildings as an expression of themselves. And business people do the same. Entrepreneurs create something new as an artistic representation of what they want to express. They're also really good at identifying what the market is moving toward. Steve Jobs was not a computer expert. You know what Steve Jobs studied in college and what turned him on to Apple? Calligraphy. He studied calligraphy. He loved design. And that's why Apple computers came out with green and orange and blue and brown shapes, and IBM's were black and flat and square. He was an artist. And finally, they measure their success, their acceptance, their love, if you will, by the profit that they produce. That's their measure, that's their metric. If people buy my product, they love my art. Our best hope for the future of humanity lies in the power and effectiveness of socially motivated, highly empowered individuals to fight for changes in the way we live, think, and behave. This perfectly captures the essence of what a social entrepreneur is. Jeff Skoll, co-founder of eBay, left eBay, co-founded Skoll Foundation, just like Bill Gates left Microsoft and founded the Gates Foundation. It's the same talent pool. It's the creative expression moving from business to the social world. Social entrepreneurs are practical dreamers who have this talent and skill and the vision to solve problems. They have a vision for the future and stop at nothing to fulfill that dream of the future. This is one of my favorite because it is so poignant. Margolis and Walsh in 2003 said, "The world cries out for repair." Oh, man. There's a great old song. It says, the song went, "When a man loves a woman." Do you ever know that song? And when that guy sings that song, you can feel the power just pulling at every sinew within his body. He's singing with such a depth. And when Margolis and Walsh speak about the world cries out for repair, they're not just words. The world does cry out for repair. And it's up to social entrepreneurs, it's up to students, it's up to faculty, it's up to all of us to figure out how to repair that world. And that's their vector. Same as the business, except for one. They're innovative, they're creatively disruptive, they understand where the market is going, but they measure their success not by profit, but by social intent and social output. Social entrepreneurs are not content just to give a fish or to teach how to fish. They want to change the fishing industry. So be a social entrepreneur, be a social activist, be a nonprofit leader. It can be anything. Be a businessman. Be a businesswoman. Let me just spend 2 more final seconds, 2 more minutes, talking about this last piece and how it relates to Becker and why I'm so proud to be be associated with Becker, and how Becker is leading all the colleges in Worcester, all the colleges in Massachusetts, and is in fact leading many of the colleges in the United States. And you think I'm blowing smoke. I'm not. I have much better things to do. Becker is taking the lead on issues that are so important. What we need to do is sing that stuff from the rooftops. And for you students that are in this room, do not squander the opportunity that you're being given. There's nothing going on in any campus in the United States that I know of as important as what's going on right now here at Becker, with your notion of global citizenship and with your awareness of social innovation. So the big question is, should business care at all about social responsibility? Should they care about homeless people? Business. And these are the two guys that began the debate. Milton Friedman, famed economist, back in 1970, wrote an article in the New York Times, said, absolutely not. Business of business is business. It's like Scrooge in the Christmas Carol. The business of business is business. Make profit, pay taxes, that's all we're supposed to do. Ian Davis in 2005 said, absolutely not. The world has changed. Business does have a social responsibility. And we as business people in the world need to make sure that we accommodate the challenges of the communities in which we work. What does it mean to say that business has responsibilities? Only people can have responsibilities. Well, businesses are made now of people. Davis argues that social issues are companies that treat social issues as either irritating or simply unjustified vehicles are turning a blind eye to impending forces that have potential to alter strategic future in fundamental ways. And so along comes this guy named Muhammad Yunus, invented in 1976, microcredit. He's now moved on to something else, and it's called social business. And social business takes social enterprise, social entrepreneurship even further. Takes corporate social responsibility and shared value even further. He's an amazing human being. Nobel Peace Prize winner, 2006. He's going to be here in Worcester at the Presidential Speaker Series here at Becker. Becker. Not Harvard, not MIT, not Holy Cross, not WPI's got all the money. Becker. That says volumes. And he's going to talk to us about this notion of social business. Investor-led business creation, but has no stockholder dividend payments. Think of Newman's Own. When you go to a supermarket, you buy Newman's Own spaghetti sauce, all the profits go to social causes. Well, Muhammad Yunus is now calling for a worldwide revolution in capitalism, changing the nature, the fundamental nature of capitalism. That's pretty big. And he's saying capitalism is good, money is okay, but what we need to do is also create within profit-making businesses a component piece that produces profit for the one sole purpose, social good. Why? Because we need to respond to the MDGs and the SDGs. We have too many issues to address. Here are some of his principles, which you can talk about another day. But it's basically getting investors to invest in profit-making companies. All the profits, however, are returned to social good. What a wonderful perspective of capitalism. I never thought this possible in my lifetime to even begin having this conversation. In the 1980s, greed was good. You know, we loved greed. I went to business school, and I was told, you know, greed, survival of the fittest. Put your competition out of business, don't care about anybody else except you. The world has changed, and you are that change. That's Muhammad Yunus. So I'm going to tell you a little story about your president. So I had a couple of students at Clark University in my social entrepreneurship class. And they loved social entrepreneurship, went back to Bangladesh, both of them were Bengali, and began working at the Yunus Center, Grameen Bank. And through them, and this is one, this is Zenit Islam. And through Zenit and Fabria Ferozi, and I hope one day you'll get to meet them, they went to Muhammad Yunus and said, there's something going on in Worcester. This place called Worcester, Mass. We think you ought to open this up for a Yunus Center, first of its kind in the United States of America. And he listened to them, and he listened to them, and he said, well, that's a big deal. So he asked me to come over to Bangladesh, to Dhaka, and I did. This was in February of this year. And this was my first meeting with Muhammad Yunus. This for me is like meeting, I don't know, a rock star. And I teach Muhammad Yunus. I teach microfinance. I employ microfinance with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And suddenly to meet Muhammad Yunus was for me a great personal pleasure. Even held up a shirt. At the end of a 1-hour meeting with him, he looked at me and said, where do you teach? I said, well, I teach at Clark University. I have some work with WPI, and I'm on the board of a place called Becker. And he said, oh, so your students are from Clark, so this is where you want this Becker, this Yunus Center. Go to Clark. Natural fit, right? Students were from there, I teach there. I said, no, I have a better place. And I tell you this because you need to recognize the type of leadership you have. I said, no, it's not going to go to WPI, and it can't go to Clark. It can only go to one place. It can go to Becker College if you will have us. And he asked me why in this meeting. And I said, because when I needed help, there was only one college president that stood up. Only one. And I asked a bunch of them. And that was your president, Robert Johnson. When I needed to bring 2 young people from Sierra Leone who were poor, Sam and Betty Kanu, many of you may know them. They are the son and daughter of my partner, Pastor Michael Kanu. And I needed to give them an education so that they could go back to their country and do something great. They have not 2 pennies to rub together. And I went to Clark, and I went to WPI, and I begged. We don't do that. Can't do that. And I came here, and I went in Robert's office, and I asked him the same question. And I expected the same answer. No, can't do that. And instead, he looked at me and he said, I can make that happen. In fact, I'm going to make it happen. You tell them they have a scholarship. That's why the Yunus Center for Social Business, the first in the United States of America, is at Becker College, opening this coming few months from now. And Becker College will be world known as a result of it, because of this commitment to people, to young people, to global citizenship, and to global social good. Anyone can get a degree in nursing, biology, mathematics, science, history, English, anyone. You can go to any college and get that, anywhere. There's only one college that you can go to with this type of DNA commitment to people who want really and truly to change the world. And it's not just a byline or a nice little throwaway on their website. It's a commitment to do something great. And when he said, he looked at me, Muhammad Yunus, and he said, okay. I almost fainted. And then I gave him a shirt, which I happen to have in my backpack. And he gladly held it up. And that was the beginning of our discussions for a Yunus Social Business Center, at Becker College, and the development of social business, first in the United States, first in Massachusetts, first anywhere. Becker. Not bad. Robert and I then went over in March, where he's able to sign the protocols with Dr. Eunice to bring a Eunice Center to Becker College, which you'll be seeing unfold in the weeks and months ahead. So I end with this. Be a great business person. Make a lot of money. I'm all for it. And when you do, give something back. Become a nonprofit leader. Become a social entrepreneur. Become a social business owner. Work with do whatever you want. Become a great nurse. Become anything. But never, ever forget, ever forget that to whom much is given, much is expected. We are given everything. The fact that we have a roof over our head, a bed to sleep in at night, or a refrigerator in our house somewhere, maybe a few dollars in our pocket, make us the 1%ers of the world. We may not think so, but it's true. That's where I work. I'm not going to talk about it today. You want to talk about it another day, I'm happy to do that. But I don't just talk about what I do. It's important, like Becker, that you do what you talk about. So think, create, inspire, repeat. Think, create, inspire, do it again. And so I end with this. This is my challenge to you. I told you I was going to ask you at the beginning. What would you like to do before your time ends? That's a more relevant-ish question for me and perhaps some of the faculty in the room, because we're getting closer to that time. You're still in the sweet spot. You're in your 20s. You've got a long way to go. But this is the existential question. This is the question, in my opinion, that transcends all others. Take your tests, study hard. Next semester, take more tests, study hard. But at the end of the day, this is the question you're going to have to answer. What would you like to do before your time ends? Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.